Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Council Chambers on this beautiful October 13th. Hopefully everyone had enough turkey and filling that their stomachs are full for the next 3 weeks, because I think I, like many people, tend to overeat during Thanksgiving, and that's okay. That's what we do. We celebrate with our friends and family, and we eat, and we be merry, and we share stories and create lots of memories. Members of council, there's agenda before you. Administrative staff, is there anything to add?
Nothing to add, Your Worship.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, if I have the motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move the Town Council adopt the October 13th, 2020 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. That is carried. Moving over to public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to talk to council about anything that's not on the current agenda. I don't see anybody else in the gallery. Administration staff, has anybody sent in a written submission?
There are no written submissions, Your Worship.
Thank you. Moving on now to presentations, and today we're joined by our MLA for our Spruce Grove Stony Plain, or since you're in Stony Plain now, it's Stony Plain Spruce Grove riding.
That is correct, Your Worship.
Welcome to Council Chambers, and the mic is there, and you may start your presentation whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, the rest of council, for allowing me to come before you today and just give a little bit of update on behalf of the province and to tell a little bit about my work that's been happening in the area, which benefits all of our residents here. So first of all, before I begin, I just want to bring greetings on behalf of our newest Minister of Municipal Affairs, Minister Allard. I am not sure if any of you have had the pleasure to meet with Minister Allard before, but she is absolutely amazing, and she truly loves people. She loves communities. I've had a couple different meetings with her, just telling her about ideas from my perspectives as a former councillor in Spruce Grove. And we're hopefully lining up a time for her to visit in person and visit all of you, hopefully coinciding with the opening of the new library that's going to be in Stony Plain, hopefully sooner than later. I'm afraid to say any dates at this point for any projects, but Minister Allard is extremely excited about coming out to Stony Plain. I just want to list out a couple of the priorities that I've been working on in this area, and many obviously are of huge interest, I know, to many members of council. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about Stony Plain Central School. That is still expected to go out for tender in October. Talking with Parkland School Division and as well as Mr. Mayor yourself, from the town's perspective, as of now, there is no delays to that plan, so we're just eagerly waiting for that announcement for that project to go to tender. I know many of the parents that have children, and of course the kids in that area that are anxious for a new school site will be happy to see that work start. A couple minister visits actually came to the area, or specifically to Stony Plain, over the last week. So last week, Minister here joined me in Spruce Grove and Stony Plain as part of her provincial cultural tour around the province. And so we visited a couple sites in Spruce Grove, and then we came out to Stony Plain, and we visited the Multicultural Center here in Stony Plain, as well as the Pioneer Center, the Pioneer Museum, and and just checked out the museum and many of the exhibits there. And I have to say, once again, Stony Plain has absolutely hit it out of the park. Minister here was absolutely floored by the conduct of the people here, how friendly it was out here, the quality of the exhibits, and she was sorry she couldn't come during the actual cultural days just because her commitments around the province, but she has put Stony Plain as the top of the list for a potential place to visit next year. And once again, it just shows to the class of the town and of the people here, and they really rolled out the red carpet. Minister here during that time took the time to serenade the Multicultural Center. As many of you know, she's a fantastic singer, and I found it appropriate for me not to join in because I wanted to keep the singing at a high level, but Minister here just was absolutely awesome. And then actually this afternoon, Minister Schultz, Rebecca Schultz from Calgary Shaw, the Minister for Children's Services, came to Stony Plain, and she came for a ribbon cutting at the Alberta Parenting for the Future Center, just up the street here in Stony Plain. And as many of you know, APFA has been named as one of the main hubs in the province in our new hub and spoke model to provide services for families and for kids all over, well, I guess all west of Edmonton, from the borders of Edmonton to the 4 First Nations in this immediate area to as far over as Wildwood out west. So it's a big area, and I'm very thankful to have lobbied on APFA's behalf. And so Minister Schultz was actually supposed to come out in the spring, but due to COVID at the time, we didn't think it was appropriate to do a ribbon cutting, especially when there was pretty big issues at that point. But regardless, she came out today, and once again, she was again floored by the professionalism of the staff there, and just kudos and hats off to Pamela Geddes and the rest of them over there for just doing a job well done. And I know families in this area are absolutely going to benefit from the APFA. In terms of road construction updates, I mean, I don't have to tell everyone in this room how frustrating it is that 779 is not completed yet, and by the looks of it, it won't be completed this fall. Obviously, there was, as everyone can attest, there was a lot of workers out there trying their best to get it done, but just with the excessive rain delays at the start of the construction season, coupled already onto the rain delays of all last year, it just means there's going to be a little bit of more work that has to take place early next year. But I'm not going to mention the date when it should be done by, but we're hoping for 2021 to be a pretty conclusive year for construction here in the town of Stony Plain. And I guess the last point I want to talk about is this, in terms of a big portion of my work over the last couple months has been on the school rollout. And while granted, it's not a part of the jurisdiction of the town, we are one community, and it is, the same parents that have kids in schools, they exist here in the town, and so, we're all connected that way. And so a big part of my work over the last couple months has been working with Minister LaGrange, as well as serving on the Public Health Act Review Committee and working with Dr. Hinshaw there, and trying to make sure that our kids are safe in school, and that as the schools roll out, that they're going to be in a safe environment and their mental health can be improved and they can continue to learn and grow. In this area, Parkland School Division and Evergreen School Division at the start of September had school rollouts of approximately 86%, which I think is pretty phenomenal. And we're actually looking at having close to 90% over the next month. So not only has the ratio of parents that have decided to send their kids back to school been wonderfully high, because it shows faith in the system the system and the rules have been put in place. The parents that are currently learning at home have been able to see the success rate and both the mental health being improved by the kids and realizing that, maybe the sky isn't falling. And appropriate precautions have been taking in place, and more of those parents are switching from the at-home learning option to the school option. And I think that's, I don't want to quite say I'm jumping up and down in excitement, but I'm cautiously optimistic that it shows a high level of satisfaction from parents saying that they are confident with the rules that have been put in place. So just last week as well, I was able to go for a tour with numerous Evergreen School Division trustees to an elementary school in Spruce Grove to see firsthand the types of the new COVID-19 protocols for the kids. We talked to some kids and seeing firsthand. I know my kids were in school at the beginning of September, and so we're going to continuously monitor numbers and infection rates. And obviously, we're going to react accordingly. But I do think, just based upon the fact that we've been able to limit the amount of infections that have taken place from student to student transfer at school, and that the number of parents that are continuously sending their kids to school from the at-home option, I think it shows so far that we are succeeding in our approach to kind of balance the needs of safety and education, and I think that's been well received by many parents. So at this point, Mr. Mayor, those are kind of the main points I want to talk about, but As always, I am open to any questions that council may have on any issue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emily Thurton, and we definitely appreciate the work you've done on behalf to advocate and lobby the provincial government for the works that need to be done in our community, especially something essential and the Highway 779 upgrading project to make sure that it stays on track and hopefully finish sooner than later, because it has been dragging on long time. Maybe I'll just start off the questions here. One of the kind of plans that the town of Stony Plain wants to work towards advocacy is an expansion of the Westview Health Center. There is definitely a need and demand in our community for the expansion, so that we can provide the services for our region and for the region to the west of us. Have you heard anything regarding that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. So I did actually, one of the first questions I asked to Minister Shandro when I was first elected was actually just for that, on that very point, was to find out the status of Westview Medical Center. At that point, it was communicated to me that there were no plans for an expansion of the center. However, there are significant plans in the works for long-term care facilities, additional long-term care facilities to be in this area, located in this area. Spruce Grove and Stony Plain was identified as a high priority need. And so from a medical perspective and more housing spots, that is something actively that the ministry is looking at. So there was a request for proposals to convert existing housing spaces for long-term care facilities by providers around the province. And again, providers or potential providers in Spruce Grove and Stony Plain will be given priority, but there is additional interest for more additional long-term care facilities. As you know, many people in the rural areas, when they sell their respective properties, they want to move to the urban areas closer to medical services, and Stony Plain and Spruce Grove indirectly are ideally suited for that. So that is the big interest for the ministry right now. But as of now, I don't see or hear any plans for an expansion of Westview Medical Center.
Thank you very much. Members of council, any questions for understanding and clarity? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, MLA Turton. It's nice to see you here tonight. Speaking of the seniors' housing, as you know, because I've told you often enough, I am the chair of Meridian Housing Foundation. And a few weeks ago, we received a letter from the Deputy Minister that indicated the province is starting to look at ways to reduce costs and to increase efficiency in seniors' housing. And one area that they're looking at is amalgamation of the different housing management boards. So I'm wondering if you have heard of that, and exactly what is the point of view that the government has toward that step that they're looking at. As you know, our housing management boards here, of the Meridian Housing Foundation, looks after Stony Plain, Spruce Grove, Wabamun, Parkland County. It's so well run and efficient. And so I need a different point of view as to why they're looking at that area of housing for seniors.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Bennett. So on that specific point, I have not heard of anything in terms of the amalgamation or even the interest about it. I could definitely take a look and see if there is some additional talk about that. What I can say is that the provincial government has really asked our partners, and we do consider like housing authorities, housing boards, school boards, municipalities, to offer their services in the most efficient way possible. And we, as leaders in those respective areas, shouldn't be afraid to have those conversations about how we can streamline our services for the betterment of the resident. And so while there's nothing specifically that I know about this issue, I do pledge to get back to you about it and shake some trees and see if I can find something else about it. But to kind of quote from Minister Tays, he said, "There's never a good time to run inefficient service within the public service. And so I think all of us are beholden to the fact that we have to run our respective areas as efficiently as possible, and I would probably think that amalgamation or talk about amalgamation, if there was any, would probably be as a result of potential cost savings. But again, I am just guessing at this point because I haven't heard anything specifically on that.
If I could follow up, Mr. Mayor. I guess the part of the letter that put alarm bells in my mind was that they indicated if any housing management board was looking for a new executive director or a CAO, that they should let the provincial government know that and not to send out an RFP or any kind of advertising for new CAOs when it came to Housing Management Board. To me, that indicated that the talks had gone on a little bit longer than I had assumed they had, so just that's a point that I wanted to make, that kind of made me stop and think, if they are indicating that they want to know if and when a new CAO is going to be hired, then, that indicated to me that it's something that they want to be involved in. I mean the provincial government. So if you could just look up, try and find out a little bit of information about that, and then let me know, or let Meridian Housing Authority know, that would be very appreciative.
No, thank you again for the comments, Councillor Bennett. I would maybe perhaps ask if you can maybe send my office a copy of that letter, if possible. Just that way it makes it a little bit easier for me to follow up on. It is also important to realize that, there's housing boards and housing authorities right across the entire province. And so while, individual housing authorities and that, having served on Spruce Grove City Council for so many years, I can attest for, how well run the Meridian Foundation is. I also realize that there's countless housing authorities right across the province, and there may be varying degrees of responsibility or size or things like that. And so when those types of directives do come from a province, it's with a broad brush, right from high level all the way to Lethbridge. And so, but if you can send me that letter, then I can follow up on that, and we'll see if we can get a little bit more clarification for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions, comments from members of council? Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, Emily Turton. My question is with regards to the Westview Health Center, and you said that there isn't any initiative at this point in time to expand on the hospital. But when you look at efficiencies and, things that I have read in the past with regards to, for example, the use of a hospital facility by individuals with chronic health issues, so for example, somebody with diabetes or something related to that, and there are other facilities or clinics that deal with those types of things in, for example, Ontario and I'm sure elsewhere. So freeing up some beds in the hospital for emergency cases and things like that. Is there somebody looking at some of the efficiencies that we could address, like chronic issues versus actual need for somebody being in a hospital?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Matthews. I guess on that note, like there has been conversations over the past about from Minister Shandro and I know even historically from AHS about the term bed blockers, for example, where people that maybe more so require long-term care facilities are maybe using hospital beds instead. And when you look at a cost-benefit analysis, using a hospital bed is the least financially efficient way possible for long-term care when long-term beds should be used instead. And I believe that is why Minister Shandro is so adamant about looking for requests for proposals about the new Aisley grants, about new long-term care facilities, to really start freeing up that space at Westview so that for residents in our area that, and my kids being a perfect example, when they had to be admitted, they know that there's going to be a bed ready for them, is that when they actually need the help, when they're when they're, being looked after, when they had an issue in the short term, and those beds aren't being taken up by residents, for example, that are just there when they could be in a long-term care facility instead. So we're actively trying to get around that issue and those bed blockers by the request for proposal for new long-term care beds. But unfortunately, it is still going to be a while before we can really remedy that situation. Facilities take a long time to get built. Even existing facilities that are going to be retrofitted take a while. But I do think it's positive that as a government, we're taking those active steps to, to help people and put them in the facilities that they need to be in. And really, I think hospitals, they need to be there for if an incident happens on the drop of a hat. And so Westview is amazing. I've gone for multiple tours there. I've seen firsthand the level of care, both to my own kids and to myself, when I was admitted a couple times for certain issues that I'm, slightly embarrassed to talk about. But it's a fantastic facility, and I know it's one of the main reasons why people choose Stony Plain to be their home. And I'm going to make sure that I continually support that facility, and it's also one of the highest used medical facilities in a rural facility in the province, or in a rural setting in the province. And so it's definitely getting its use, but we got to make sure we can use it more efficiently, for sure. And I think the way to do that is with long-term care facilities.
Thank you. Go ahead.
If I may just follow up with just, I guess, the comment. It's not only just finding the right facility for individuals. It would be wonderful to keep people at home, and keeping people at home is a result of having a facility that they can go to. So somebody that has a chronic issue that just needs a little extra care than what they would get at a doctor's office, but they don't need the full care of a hospital or to be in a nursing home. So I'm hoping you're looking at that as well.
The aging in place aspect is extremely important when it comes to the long-term sustainability of the healthcare system. 100% agree with you. If someone just needs minor care and they could stay at home, it's my personal preference that they stay there. It's their home. It's where they feel most comfortable in. We don't need to potentially move them or transplant them from their neighbors to move them to a facility that they might not have lived in ever before. So I 100% agree with you, and I know that we're actively looking at ways to be able to provide that model or continue to support that model in a cost-efficient manner. But it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm glad to hear that aging in place is on the radar of the provincial government. I think a few of the initiatives in our community through SSS, such as the adopted driveway, allows seniors to stay home, and residents to adopt a driveway and help seniors to keep them clean into the wintertime. And also, we have a huge program called Meals on Wheels. I'm sure that's part of Spruce Grove as well. We try to make sure that a senior gets a hot meal each and every day. So.
And those are all reasons, Mr. Mayor, why Stony Plain continues to be one of the top places in the province to live. I mean, not just from the decision-making of council to the sound financial stewardship, but, all the little things you talked about. I mean, it just makes Stony Plain an incredible place to live.
Thank you. Members of Council, any questions for our MLA? Okay. See no more hands up, but let me just ask you about the recent announcement regarding AHS and some kind of the work that's happening around that, and reducing the burden with the operating costs.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously that was the announcement this morning. Okay. Yes, thank you. So, so Minister Shandro talked about some restructuring that's going to be taking place within AHS, and it's really going to force AHS to focus on its core principles, which is to look after and provide healthcare services for the resident. There's obviously a lot of auxiliary services that have been built up over time, so laundry service, food prep, cleaning, for example, that are going to be moving to a contractor model. And because of these decisions that Minister Shandro has announced today, not all taking place right off the start, but it's going to account for over $600 million in annual savings. And when you have over 50% or approximately 48% or 47% of our provincial budget, about $25 or $22 billion, and you talk about a $600 million savings that you can realize and have the same level of care to the actual patient, I think that's pretty incredible. And so He's going to be rolling out the details over obviously the next couple weeks. But you know, I think it's from the responses that I have received, at least today, at least the limited ones. I haven't been in the office very much, but people are cautiously optimistic to see that real savings can be found. Like, for example, you know, the previous government spent $200 million on laundry machines and laundry services when that can be done at a fraction of the cost with a contracted model. By making the decisions that we did, it's going to allow AHS to really focus on patient care and making sure that the residents in Stony Plain and Spruce Grove, our friends and neighbors, you know, they can get reduced wait times, they can get a higher level of care, and they know that, you know, like, and still experience the same level of, you know, food preparation or cleaning services through our agreements with partners or with private sector partners. So it'll be interesting to see when the details roll out and the timelines. But it's definitely a long-term plan. It's going to take place over a couple years, but I think that Albertans will realize that the savings are significant, and anytime we can reinvest that back into the health system, I think it's going to be a good thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the update, appreciate it. And any more questions? Thank you, Rich, for your time. Definitely appreciate the work that you've done on our behalf in the legislature, and we wish you all the best as the fall sitting starts again this Monday. I'm sure you're looking forward to it, all those long nights. And
I was saying, Mr. Mayor, I would never complain about a long council meeting again after you've had one discussion point for 3 days straight. But I always appreciate the opportunity to come out to Stony Plain to talk about, and I always make the point with the Speaker of the Legislature that, you know, I'm the MLA of Stony Plain, Spruce Grove. Unless I'm in Spruce Grove, then it's Spruce Grove, Stony Plain. So I always appreciate the ability to represent the greatest riding in the province. Thank you.
thank you very much. Have a good evening, sir. So, Administration, are there any other presentations that will be using that front area?
There, not, your worship.
Okay, so we will not call a break, so that doesn't need to be sanitized until after the meeting. Moving on to number 5 of our agenda, which is statutory public hearings. We have none today. So moving on to number 6, which is adoption of council meeting minutes. Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council approved the Town Council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, members of council, you've had a chance to go through them. Are there any errors or omissions on the RCM of September 28th and the GMP of October 5th? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. From the September 28th minutes, it shows item, I believe it's 9.1, as having been voted on unanimously. I believe I was a dissenting vote. I would like to have that corrected.
That is correct. So that is page 15. Thank you. Council, any other errors and omissions? Okay, that was the only one I had to. Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to council boards and commissions and committee reports. 7.1, Councilor Pletchko, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. That Town Council received the Growth and Commerce Committee minutes of August 25th, 2020 for information.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding the minutes that we can ask the members that do sit on the committee? Okay. I see none. Maybe I'll ask a question regarding that. There was a presentation regarding smart city infrastructure. I think that's been kind of topics at AUMA and FCM. Can the members provide some comments regarding that presentation? Councilor Mannings, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So basically, the Smart City Infrastructure Investment Consortium, this is a group that is working with Beaumont right now to look at broadband infrastructure. And in terms of, I know that the Economic Development Officer will be looking more at the opportunity there and possibly bringing back some information.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and there's also a Smart City Conference that is held yearly as well, where municipalities kind of smart link their utilities and everything in the municipality so that there's, I guess that's a timeline of how many times the trees are watered and et cetera, so they have an idea of how efficient everybody is. So it's kind of interesting when you open the whole parameters and the doors to Smart City, kind of building a connected infrastructure where we know where our plows are, how often they work, when the blade's up. So kind of interesting, but also kind of scary when Big Brother is there watching you every move. Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Members of Council, there's no bylaws to discuss tonight, so moving on to number 9, which is business items. 9.1 is the 2020 tax recovery. Councillor Loy, please, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, the Town Council approve, 1, the terms and conditions of sale for the 2020 public auction as presented, and 2, the Council establishes the reserve bids as presented for properties being offered for sale at the 2020 public auction.
Okay. Members of Council, we deal with this every year because this is an ongoing thing that we have to do as a municipality. Administration for a presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd ask our Manager of Financial Services to just give a brief overview.
Thank you and good evening. As required by the Municipal Government Act, municipalities must annually prepare a tax arrears list of parcels that have tax arrears in excess of 1 year as of March 31st. Further to this, any property that remains on the list for 2 years must be offered for auction. Prior to the auction process, and as soon as the taxes are in arrears, administration works diligently to contact landowners in various forms, including statements, reminder letters, and phone calls, before the outstanding amounts are turned over to taxi service. Included in this agenda is the 2020 Tax Recovery Public Auction Reserve Bids and the 2020 Public Auction Conditions of Sale. The Public Auction Conditions of Sale document is included and outlines conditions of the sale consistent with the Tri-Region. All property owners have until the time of the auction to pay their arrears or enter into a tax payment agreement to have the property removed from the auction. We have already had 1 property pay arrears and be removed from the list from the time they received their notice of public auction to today. That leaves 5 remaining that you saw in your package. The date of the auction has been set to December 11th, 2020 at 10 a.m. in the council chambers and will be advertised following today's council approval as per the guidelines of the MGA. We will now take any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Members of Council, any questions of clarity and understanding regarding this? Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one, I guess, technical question with regards to the market value, or that the bids, the reserve bids, must be as close as possible to the market value. What does that mean? Does that mean 10% up, above, or below? Does it mean 5%? Like, you know, what does close to mean?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Councillor Matties. It is defined in the MGA. It is very general statement in the MGA that it should be as close to the assessed value, the market value, which is recommended that it is used the latest assessed value that we have, which is the 2019 assessed value.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you. I see no more hands up. I'll call the question. All in favor? As carried. Moving on to 9.2, which is the financial trends report. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this is an annual item that we bring to council just to give you some benchmarking against other municipalities as to where the town sits. And I will again ask our Manager of Financial Services to walk you through the report.
Thank you. right? We're just having a share screen issue, so just bear with us for a minute.
My apologies. Thank you for your patience. My PowerPoint decided to crash on me right there, so we just had to start it. So included in your council package tonight is the 2019 year-end financial trend report. This evening, we will highlight a few important financial indicators and the analytics behind them. On page 40, the definition of financial condition and how municipal officials address financial condition are stated. Analytics of this report were completed with these in mind. In this year's report, inflation was pulled out separately into one chart to show the fluctuations. In previous reports, revenues and expenses would have been adjusted by these amounts. In order to simplify the data, this is being presented on its own. Adjusted revenues and expenses is not a simple calculation of just removing inflation, as it does not impact all areas or all areas equally. For that reason, we felt it was better represented separately as a point of reference. The operations snapshot shows the expenses growing at a higher rate than the revenue. This trend going forward is unsustainable and an indication of using reserves to fund expenditures. The smallest gap in 2019 between revenue and expenses can be explained due to the seasonal challenges faced by the golf course, where expenses were higher than revenue. Operating expenditures per capita is a related chart and on page 48. And it shows the same pattern and the gap between the operating expenditures and revenue closing. This data points to a structural deficit on operations. As benchmarked against our competitors listed on page 54, Stony Plain has increasingly grown in operating expenditures per capita and has been consistently above the median for the last 7 years. In regards to revenue, Stony Plain is on the low side of revenue per capita and also the lowest of the tri-region. The main source of revenue for the town of Stony Plain is property taxes. Stony Plain has remained at the lower end of the comparative municipalities in terms of property taxes per capita. However, new services have been added. Property tax as a percentage of operating expenses has steadily declined since 2017, proving the operating expenses increasing at a higher rate than the property taxes. This is an indication of expenses that have not yet been put into the tax base, such as the RCMP debenture servicing in excess of $700,000. The town of Stony Plain is at the very bottom of the comparator chart. Assessment is a key component to property tax revenue and has remained generally flat, with growth offsetting assessment decline. Non-residential assessment continues to increase, while residential has seen a reduction. Preliminary numbers from our assessor points this trend continues into 2020. As the assessment for non-residential has increased by 22% since 2015, this indicator will be taken into consideration as we revisit the policy for 80-20 split on residential, non-residential taxation. In the current model, the increase in assessment on non-residential properties and residential assessment remaining flat or declining results in the residential properties paying more in taxes. This policy is earmarked to be reviewed as part of the fiscal sustainability as well as up for review in 2021. Reserve balances are another key financial condition indicator and have continued to experience depletion. Reserves are significantly lower than the median and at the bottom of the range. This is a measure of using reserves at a greater rate than replenishment. Reserve balances is a measure of the municipality saving for the future, for inclement events, or having flexibility for unforeseen challenges. Reserves per capita are trending at the very bottom of the range of our comparators, which is dangerously low. Long-term debt as a percentage of reserves is only at 51%, which is the bottom range of our comparators. This would mean we could service 51% of our debt from reserves if situation arose, and must be considered as we look to take on new debt in the future and the current economic uncertainty to raise taxes to fund debt. As we experience the uncertainty of COVID, economy, and unknown future grant support, these measures will become more acute. As we move into the 2021 to 2023 corporate planning sessions, these trends will assist in understanding financial condition of the municipality into the future. We will now answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. So before I accept the motion to debate it, let's, any questions of clarity understanding on the presentation? No? Okay, see none. Thank you very much. That was a very good presentation. Councillor Laurie, please.
Financial trend report for information.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of council, open up for questions of comment and debate and questioning. So, Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Just bear with me a second. So, thank you, Your Worship. My question and great concern is related to our reserve level. When we talk about our strategic plan, we speak about one of the key objectives is to strengthen the fiscal sustainability of our community. And what I see is from 2015, our total reserves per capita have declined by 20%. I see that we're 83% below the median in terms of reserves per capita. Reserves as a percentage of long-term debt, from 2015 we were at 152%, and today we're at 51% in 2019. We really need to, if I look at a household, we would make sure, and I mean, this is not a young family in terms of a community that is just starting out and wouldn't expect to have the means in place to cover our expenses. We are a city, actually a large town, that has the ability to have the reserves in place, and I feel we haven't done that job. And we know today that we've got challenges with COVID, with oil and gas sector, challenges that, we've had difficult times before, but we have not seen anything like this. So moving forward, this needs to be a very high level of priority. And so my question is, for administration, how would they recommend that we would move back to what you would feel would be a financially prudent level, say over the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, does administration want to provide a comment?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matthews, I can add a few comments. I think it's a good point, and I mean, later on in the agenda, you see we're talking capital funding as well. I think, and it also ties into the asset management piece, which you also see on the agenda tonight. As we better understand these assets, it becomes easier to justify why we need to set those dollars aside for those future requirements. And we've worked through, a number of different areas, and you'll see some of it coming at you as part of the corporate plan as well, to ensure that we are putting enough in reserves and having that debate at council as to where the priorities and where the dollars need to go. I mean, it's always a balancing act, but I think the thing that the manager of finance has said is, it's become more acute with the the economy and COVID and all these things flying at, everyone, including the municipality. But, it becomes important to make sure that there's money sitting in reserves so that we have flexibility to deal with things as they're coming up. Now, in the past, some of the reserves have been used for, very important projects such as the downtown for the community, and those were good decisions. But I think with the economy changing and just the current environment changing, it's a good point for council to look at that and make sure that, we're providing good information so you understand the current position and we can make some decisions going forward.
If I just may follow up with that, and I know this is carrying over to other discussions that we'll be having later on this evening, but in terms of as we plan moving forward, would it be possible to look at scenarios where not only we're looking at some of the capital projects that we do have, but also looking at reserve funding and things like that too, to ensure that we can really capture the whole picture when we're looking at making decisions moving forward?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, I think you'll see more of it included within the corporate plan than there maybe has been in the past, just so that there is that understanding. And as we understand it more internally, as well as to the future needs that those reserves are being set up to fund. So as we go through the next month, I think you'll see some good information that has some good recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great questions, Councilor Matties. And I'd like to provide some comments as well. If members of council turn to page 31 or page 68 of 148, it's been an ongoing discussion and conversation around the council chambers within town Stony Plain for many, many years. And that's how do we maintain our advantage? We've always maintained a low tax rate. Along with a low tax rate means lower reserves. It also means lower services. But that's not the case in town Stony Plain. We have lower tax rates, we have lower reserves, but we have higher services. Case in point, if you look at page 68, where it has comparator between the three municipalities in the tri-region. This is the revenue per capita, so how much they charge on average. Stony Plain is at the lowest. So we collect the least taxes per our residents. If we move to the next page, on page 69, Stony Plain provides the highest expenditure in capital. So we spend the most money for our residents. So those are some of the reasons why our reserves have been lower, is because we have decided not to tax our residents to build up reserves, is to fund what we have. Councillor Loy?
Yeah, pardon me, yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm glad you refreshed my memory the last years on council, that we do a whole lot, get a whole lot done with a whole lot less, and that's sort of like been a motto of our community, or this council and previous councils, and we've endeavored to keep that. I would like a question, though, to administration, if they can say this is where they would recommend, let's say, our reserves to be, and that's actual money. So how would we get that money there? Like, what would be the tax percentage that would be necessary? I think when we're debating this, and we'll be talking with the citizens of the town, that we can say, yes, very easy. We can get our reserves up into this comfort zone or whatever you recommend, but it's going to be X number of percentage tax-wise. And I think when these people really look at the figures, not only does it allow us to understand it more, but we can tell our people that as well. And it is really quite simple in my opinion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Does the Minister want to provide a comment to Councillor Loy?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loy, I mean, I take your points, and I think that it is a good point in that, the reserves do come from the tax base. That's how they're funded. And I think the other point that I was thinking through was just, the reserves are complicated. There's many things that they're funding, and we're not going to fix it in 1 year. So there'll need to be some strategy and council direction as to how, and, all municipalities have this funding gap. So how do you deal with that, and how quickly do you want to deal with it? And we know that residents are struggling to pay their bills, so how much tax increase can they take? So it's understanding all those things and then weighing them out and, taking small steps forward.
May, Your Worship, through, yes, thank you. I think you've got a clear, pardon me, clear understanding of what I'm asking, and you'll be able to bring back some very concrete numbers, and we could look at different types of reserves that we have and say, if it should come up for this is what it would cost us. And I would probably say, yes, it'll be a 2 to 3 year project at the very least. And are we willing to do that?
Okay, that's good comments.
Yeah, I appreciate that, General Manager.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead. Councilor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also looking at page 62 of 142, which was the slides that were presented. So it says there that the significant decrease in 2015 is due to a change in the accounting treatment of developer contributions. What I'm wondering is, does that mean, so we take in levies, developer levies, and because of an accounting treatment, has the money now gone from where we used to place it in reserves into another place, so that it makes our reserves look lower than they actually are?
Okay.
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay. Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Bennett and all of council. So the accounting treatment would have been changed for all municipalities, so it would show on the chart for our comparators as well. What the accounting treatment change was that it's not represented as a reserve, so it wouldn't be in here anymore, but that would be consistent, like I said, across all of those. And so the money is still there, but it's not defined as a reserve anymore.
Thank you. The reason I thought of that, Mr. Mayor, is because at one point, depreciation came into factoring all of the accounting practices that we were doing. When that happened, it kind of skewered what we were doing. In other words, we were using the depreciation value, and so it looked like we were off, but really the money was still the same. Is that kind of, in my mind, is that kind of the same sort of thing that this is? That it's more of an on the books thing than it is an actual, oh my gosh, we have no reserves.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Bennett and all of council. The developer contributions are different, and so the reserves do show that we do have depleted reserves, and so these reserves are here and available for our use for funding initiatives or supporting our tax base if we need to. And so that is why the developer contributions are also, they have different definitions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Any comments? Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. To administration, with regards to, looking on page 65 of 142, the equalized assessment per capita comparison. So that would be the tax that we, as a community, receive per capita for property tax, correct? Sorry, the equalized assessment?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Matty. So the equalized assessment per capita is just the assessment.
Oh, right, okay.
Divided by the population.
Okay, sorry, I went and looked at that, but that was just, sorry, I just had a question with that, but that's okay. So then, my actual comment is with regards to the reserves, um, they are low, and it's been presented to us that they are low. So it's not just raising taxes to increase them, it's also looking at a lot of the things that have been accomplished by this community. We've talked about so many things, the RCMP building, the downtown, the roads, etc. So there's a lot of great things that have happened here. But at the same time, do we need to keep that pace of capital investment going in a time where maybe we need to do a little replenishing to ensure that we are strong moving forward? I think that as we look over the next 3 to 5 years, as we've heard from our MLA, that the government is financially struggling at all levels with regards to COVID, with regards to oil and gas, downturn, et cetera. So to think that we're not going to be impacted and probably impacted significantly over the next 3 to 5 years, we do need the reserves in place to ensure that we can still provide the services that we require. And by thinking that that's going to come from taxes only would be, I think, a misstatement, because we just do not have the ability of our citizens to take on a lot more cost in their lives.
Okay, good comments. Anything else? Go ahead, Councilor Meyer.
Just a quick question, thank you, through you to administration. Can the administration just quickly remind me, do we have a recreation reserve?
Recreation.
Your worship, through to Councillor Meyer, yes, there was an amount allocated last year to a recreation reserve. I want to say it was around 300,000, but we could check for sure for you.
That's okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's good. Good comments, ladies. And I'll actually, ladies and gentlemen, I'll actually provide another comment here too as well. I think this is a conversation that all municipalities have, is who pays for what, right? Having large reserves is great. It makes your municipality more sustainable, allows you to weather the storm. But with those reserves, all you did was just tax people earlier to put into the bank to use later. So the question is, who pays for what and when? So if, for example, if we build, whatever, a new hockey rink, and we save $15 million to build it, so we don't have to increase taxes for it, then that means the people that lived here prior to it getting built funded this entire rink that they may not be able to use. But if we saved a little bit of money so that we can get started, for example, if we had $1 million and then we got that ball rolling, we rolled $14 million, then the taxpayers of Stony Plain today start paying for that $14 million, so that the people that are using it or here in the community, they may not use it, but they're here in the community, pays for it. So there's a thought process that has balance of who pays for what. Because if we can build up tons of reserves and fund all the things that are needed in the future, but then the past and present are paying for that future. It's just another way to look at it. And if you notice, over the last couple of years, our manager of finances and our manager of services, as well as the general manager of corporate and planning, have been coming back with a whole fiscal framework for us to look at in terms of changing our offset levies, changing our utility rates on the stormwater, on the water rates, so that those become self-funding. So the money that is required to fund upgrades, expansions, are built into that rate model, so that we don't have to worry about it. The other conversation is for council to have that discussion, is who pays for what. A few years ago, we asked the Stony Plain Public Library for not to increase their request, but to use their reserves, because it was sitting there. We gave them money, just it was sitting in a reserve that was not earmarked for anything. So we taxed our residents to give money to the Stony Plain Library that sat there doing nothing, and they came in and asked for more money. So those are the things, and the in-depth conversations that council needs to have during strat planning is, where do we go? We have the financial analysis that, the trends, that we are on the lower rate for taxation model, the lowest in the whole Edmonton metro region. We also have one of the lowest reserves. They go hand in hand. So that is maybe a shift in the way that we think. If we want to build a more sustainable future, we have to raise our tax rates to be able to sustain that. Or, as Councillor Matties mentioned, maybe we have to cut down some of our services and not do what we've done in the past. Slow down development, slow down growth, but keep the tax rates at the same rate so we can build that nest egg. A lot of conversation pieces that need to be had and talked to by members of council. Okay, that's the financial trend. So Councillor Laurie had the motion. I do not see more hands up, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Councillor Matties, 9.3, please.
The Town Council accept the asset management update presentation for information.
Thank you. Go ahead, administration.
Good evening, Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'm very happy to be here tonight to present the progress that the town has made on the asset management initiative and work that's been going on in the background for the past year. This is just a high-level update, although just to present some very exciting work we've done. So I just want to go over a brief background of the project to date and what was done in 2019, then move into some of the work that was completed in 2020, and some next steps for council's review. So it was almost a year tonight that I had given my first presentation to council on the asset management policy. This policy has set the foundation for all the work that administration has been doing since then. It's really catalyzed and allowed us to set the tone of where we were taking this project. As council is aware, the asset management is not just an initiative that administration has taken on, it is a formal initiative in the corporate plan. It is a multi-year initiative in which we are approaching piece by piece in order to, and creating a plan as we go. There are many things at play for us to consider as we get through this. This is just the first step in that project. So one of the first things that was done shortly after the council passed the asset management policy was the town formed an asset management committee made of many key leaders within different units of the town. This included members of senior leadership team, engineering, facilities, finance, information technology, and public works. Having senior leadership engaged and committed to this program has really made a big difference. It does allow for the town and other areas to authentically go and work with each other to achieve the goals within asset management that we would like to achieve. There is a note I would like to make regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, the COVID-19 has affected many different things within the town, and sadly, asset management was one of those. I want to note that it did slow us down, but it didn't stop us from pursuing this and ensuring that we are achieving this really important work that we're doing. So the early stages of the committee, one of the first things that we did was we just simply created a survey, a detailed survey given to all the members of the committee, and just asked a variety of different questions based off asset readiness, knowledge of asset management, what assets do you own, what practices do you follow, and this was just meant to paint a picture of where the town was at. There was it was just to help us baseline where are we starting from on this journey together. So we put those results together and presented them in February. And while there was a number of different things that we talked about, these are the highlights that I would just like to highlight for council's review. So one part was that there was an inconsistent understanding of asset inventories across the organization. Now, what that means is it's not necessarily that we don't know what things we own or where they are, as much as certain areas knew more about their assets than others. That isn't a good or bad thing, it's just what we had. So say replacement values, location, condition of these assets. It depended on what area you were in and what assets you were looking into. The use of geographic information systems, GIS, was inconsistent. This has to do with asset cataloging, work history, age of the assets, going back to that main asset tabulations. Some units were using Excel sheets, others may have been using lists, others may have been just relying on a senior administration official who just had it all in their head. For what had been done over time, and this was one of the things we highlighted that we have to get better at, and things that help us to move forward with it. There are also areas of improvement for policies and practices which we've been working on in the committee, as they were not consistent across the organization. Lastly is that the majority of maintenance for different assets across the organization was not necessarily in a planned state. So not to say that you can't have things just break. A vehicle having a breakdown for a flat tire is not really a planned event. However, planning oil changes, as another example, is one of those things. So those are just examples of sometimes we just got to get better at managing when we have to do interventions in our assets. Following that asset management survey, the town used its combined knowledge within the committee to create a corporate asset management plan and strategy. This was our first kick at making the potential plan that we could follow for timing in terms of which assets and which categories we would be focusing on over the next few years, given what the town's resources were and what we could achieve in those timeframes. The irony is we made this plan right before COVID happened. So there is some level of updating we will have to do to this document. But it was very refreshing to bring everyone together and have a very detailed review of taking in comments of what we think we could have an achievable state over the next few years for the town. Additionally, we created some terms of reference as well that would act as a framework for the committee and how it would operate. As council is aware, additionally, just in July, we applied for the Confederation of Canadian Municipalities Asset Management Grant. I wish I had better news to reply, but we still have not heard back formally whether we are successful or not. I have recently heard as of October 1st that they are on application 130 to 150, and we are application 283, and they're moving in batches of 30 per month. So we anticipate, if things are maintained, that we will be hearing back in February, or as I'm stating tonight, as Q1 of 2021 for our answer on that application. Additionally, the town did hire an asset management student. He is very hard at work during his work term. We had hoped to hire him as early as April. However, COVID-19 had other plans, I guess. So we had them start on August 31st. He is on a condensed work plan. He is using the best amount of his time that he has right now. Currently, we are surveying and collecting data on stormwater infrastructure across the town. And then he will be moving into a more global asset inventory exercise where he'll be presenting some of this information to the committee in December for what work he was able to accomplish. Additionally, we completed the pavement condition assessment. I would love to talk your ear off about this, but I'll be having our project engineer come in just a minute to talk further about this project. That is another part of the asset management that we're very excited to show to you tonight. So for next steps, as I stated, the asset management student will be completing their work and presenting it to the committee in December. Using that information, we'll be updating our corporate asset management plan to update and hopefully create a more detailed phasing plan of how we want to approach our assets through the town. And additionally, the FCM grant decision will be available to us hopefully Q1 of 2021. We always hope sooner, but that's currently my best anticipation. Future corporate plans, council is going into corporate planning mode, and you will no doubt see more updates on our asset management. So we will continue on doing a data gathering exercise. We hope to invest over the next few years in potentially getting some survey equipment, to begin a bridge inspection maintenance program on the town's pedestrian bridges, as well as any bridge culverts that the town may have. Continued condition assessments and data gathering. Additionally, there will be potentially a new asset management lead in the next 3 years, depending on how corporate plan goes, and additional technology software improvements. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation on asset management. Actually, it's really good to see that, and we can actually have a plan going forward. I like the, what you guys use, CAP, Corporate Asset Management Plans. Very good, thanks. Members of council, any questions and comments regarding that presentation? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a quick one. In terms of the asset management grant, do we know how much it'll be for? Or
yes, it was in the motion. I believe it's for 20,000, and we approved using 10,000 as the matching.
Your Worship, it was the town will put in 10,000. We will get 40,000.
Right. Thank you. Yes. And whatever page that was, it was on there somewhere. Any other questions? Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one quick question with regards to the investment in survey equipment. And I guess trying to understand why we would be purchasing survey equipment as opposed to maybe utilizing a service. We just heard the Alberta government earlier talk about maybe removing some of the ancillary services from healthcare and staying with what they're good at. So could you just comment on that?
Of course, Your Worship, to the councillor. Having some in-house, you're absolutely right. There are certain tasks that are good to outsource, such some of the surveying, bigger projects, for example, larger data gathering exercises. However, there is definitely a cost benefit to the town having some in-house technical knowledge and surveying ability for the task of asset management, especially when you don't know exactly what's out there and going to look for it. Sending out a surveyor that costs upwards of $180 to $200 an hour, when you can have a student that costs much less than that with the purchase of the equipment. There are some cost benefits. We're not trying to take away detailed surveying from our project or contractors. That's not the goal with purchasing it. It's just to gain the town some capacity in order to do some of the stuff on its own.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loy?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. For clarity for myself and maybe others on council, I'm gathering that when this report is all done, we are going to have an itemized list of our assets. Will there be a dollar value attached to those assets to give us a sum total? And if so, with accounting procedures, and I've seen them change in the last 6 or 7 years when I was on the TLC, and we were talking about different things, and it skewed it all around, and I never did feel that I was getting really an accurate report. Depreciation was the big thing. So my question to you, sir, is that when we get this report, will it be, again, listing our assets and their value? Will there be depreciation involved in this, or are we going to really get, for lack of better words, a true picture, Mr. Mayor, of what we own and don't own, and its value?
Thank you for your question.
Your Worship.
Oh, thank you for your question. Through Your Worship to Councillor Loy, those are great perspectives to bring forward in terms of finding the assets and their dollar values. One of the exercises in this asset management initiative is is to find out, using the asset management policy, how much of each asset class that we as a town own. Using that information to then further understand potentially its replacement value and other valuation risks. That is an exercise that we are absolutely undertaking and working towards. Part of that is finding out, part of the exercise is just finding how much of that particular asset is out there, and then assigning a risk number to it or a value to it. To your second question with depreciation, there are two parts to that. There is the finance depreciation, and then there's the condition assessment. With the finance, myself and the finance manager worked really closely on developing proper TCA practices so that we're accounting for just the asset's value, as well as trying to correlate that to its, condition assessment and replacement value. Sometimes those don't nicely line up. However, we try and make sure that council has context as to what those numbers mean when we're discussing them. It can be a complicated exercise, but we try and make sure that as much information is provided forward to council when they're reading them.
And a very quick follow-up to that, sir, through you, Mr. Mayor. Because when we look at item A, we can have a high, a low, a medium, and an average. So for me, I'd like the simplest formula that we can get, so I can get my head around it, to really what you're telling me. I don't need an inflated number that says we have millions upon this, and I don't want it too low either, because that doesn't tell us our accuracy. So it's just a comment, sir.
I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No. So with the whole asset management update and stuff, and we see how much assets we have on the grounds and roads and et cetera, what can the municipality do with the assets that we actually own?
Your worship, could I just get some more if I understand the question correctly, once we know what we have, what can we do with them? Is that the question?
Yeah, well, personally, for example, if you have, I'll just use my own experience because I can speak to that. So if I have assets in my house, I can get a mortgage or line of credit on there to finance something else that I want to do, or to pay for a house repair or pay for renovation. If we see we have these assets, can we use it as leverage to get lower rates? We can use it. What can we do with it? Or it just sits on our books as assets that are depreciating and that we have to fund and repair later on, which is a negative balance all the time.
Your worship, I think the key thing about the assets that we own is we use them to provide services to the residents. So that's what we do with them. And they're there to provide the services that residents expect, and our goal is to keep the assets in the condition in which they're in service and not out of service, and not providing those what their intended purpose is.
Yeah. Okay. Councilor Pletchko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through to administration. So just for a bit of clarity, my understanding is through understanding what our assets are and knowing where our assets are, it allows us to be able to have them assets maintained properly so that we can provide quality services to the residents of our community. By knowing all of that at the end of the day, we know what it costs to maintain them to get that service, correct?
Through your worship to Councilor Pletchko, part of the exercise is to establish what levels of service for each asset that council expects, and that we can provide the financial clarity to achieve that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay, see none. So we had Councilor Matty's already made the motion earlier, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to, let's go. So before going to 9.4, let's call it like a 6-minute recess before we come back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, back to our agenda. Moving on with 9.4 is the road condition assessment. As council is aware, we had a little kind of presentation over the summer where we had both the contractors in showing the equipment that they were using to assess our roads. So this is a report on them. So thank you very much for coming in.
I'm joined today by the engineering manager and project manager to present the 2020 Road Condition Assessment Report. This is a somewhat technical presentation, but from a governance perspective, administration feels that council should be comfortable with the data we are gathering and the analysis and recommendations that will come in the future. The report presents the current state of the town's paved roads. The town is moving towards a robust pavement management approach to the road infrastructure. The data indicates there is a backlog of roads that require attention. The recent allocation of $2.1 million from the municipal stimulus funding to 49th Avenue and Golf Course Road will improve the arterial road score in the future. In the next year, administration will be utilizing the pavement quality data to optimize and prioritize the programs in the roads area. I will now hand it over to the engineering manager for the presentation.
Thank you, General Manager, Your Worship and Council. Administration, as the General Manager just alluded to, is very excited to present its findings from the pavement condition project completed in 2020. This project is the follow-up to the equipment demonstration that Council was shown in this past summer. This project presents the town's paved road network in a consistent and repeatable metrics that are used across the region. This is the town's first step in developing a data-driven, evidence-based approach to its road network. The project engineer in charge of this project, Ben McPherson, will now present the findings from this project.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I want to thank you for having me here tonight. As the Manager of Engineering put, my name is Ben McPherson, and I'm part of the town's engineering team. Tonight, I'll be giving you a presentation on pavement management. So a little bit of a presentation overview for you. We'll first go through an introduction as to what exactly is pavement management. We'll then be talking about the town's 2020 pavement condition assessment and the network condition results that came from that project. Lastly, we will discuss our new pavement philosophy and the next steps moving forward. So what is pavement management? Well, pavement management is the practice of optimizing the condition of a road network while maximizing its dollar value. This is done through conducting a life cycle cost analysis to plan rehabilitation and maintenance work. To put it simply, pavement management is the art of choosing the right treatment for the right road at the right time. In order to identify the specifics as to what treatment, road, and timing is right, we need sufficient data. So in 2020, the town acquired MPE for the new pavement condition assessment project. Pavement data collection is a very niche market with only a small number of consultants who can do this kind of work. Luckily, MPE is quite a reputable company in Western Canada, with one of its primary services they provide being pavement assessments. The goal of this project was to establish a baseline for the pavement condition and identify short-term rehabilitation needs. So MPE's deliverables included creating a GIS network definition, which will be used by town administration to track and plan infrastructure capital programs moving forward. MPE was to conduct network-level pavement inspections, which they will then use to perform pavement analysis. The results of such analysis will be provided to the town in the form of a final project report and a geodatabase. So to collect the pavement data, MPE utilized their Class 1 profiler vehicle, which is equipped with a mounted laser measuring device. This device quantifies surface distress, profile roughness, and wheel path rutting as the test vehicle drives along the roadway. MPE subcontracted West Coast road testing to collect structural testing through the use of a falling weight deflectometer, or FWD. An FWD provides a non-destructive method for calculating the structural adequacy of a roadway. The way this works is by dropping a weight on the asphalt surface and using sensors to measure the resulting deflections. With this data, the strength of the various layers underneath the asphalt can be calculated. The information collected from the Class 1 profiler and the FWD are then used to calculate 3 key performance indicators. These indicators are used in deterioration modeling to determine the rate of failure of the roadway and the associated treatments needed to extend or renew the road's life cycle. So the 3 key parameters or performance indicators are summarized here on this slide. Now, there's a lot of information regarding these performance indicators, but the key concepts are that the collected data is summarized into 3 numbers, which represent the roadway's strength, bumpiness, and surface defects. Together, the 3 performance indicators can be used to summarize the overall pavement quality into one value, the pavement quality index. This index is a function of the 3 above indices and is measured on a scale from 0 to 100, 100 being a road in pristine condition. So why do we want to use PQI? Well, because PQI is used as a standard across the country and allows for agencies and consultants to all speak the same language. This is extremely useful when discussing service levels, as we have a direct comparison to municipalities within the region. Other municipalities, agencies that use this condition rating system include the City of Spruce Grove, the City of Edmonton, and the City of St. Albert. PQI also has the benefit of being a well-studied and reliable system, allowing for better predictions when it comes to pavement deterioration modeling. To give you an idea of what the different PQI levels look like, here are some images of roadways at various PQI ranges. Now, I will list some examples of some defects that you might see at each level, but keep in mind that these, again, are examples and the same defects will not be found on every roadway with the same PQI. So the first image here is a roadway measuring at 80 PQI. As you can see, there's no significant levels of defects on this road. It's quite early in the life cycle and would be considered in excellent condition. Next is an image of a roadway at 60 PQI. Here you can see a moderate amount of cracking, some deformation of the road profile. It can also be noted that at this PQI range, we'll start to see maintenance like crack sealing. This is the range where the roadway really starts to show its age. At a PQI of 50, you can see the road is getting to be in quite rough condition. This example shows a significantly oxidized surface with some fatigue cracking and rutting in the wheel path. At this stage, the roadway is really starting to show some roughness and deformation that will result in surface ponding and a noticeable quality drop to road users. Lastly, we have an image of a roadway with a PQI of 40. Here you can see some alligator cracking, deformation of the crown of the road, and delaminating of the asphalt. So now that you have an idea of what different PQI ranges look like, let's compare this to our network's present status results. So the first number on this table that I want to draw your attention to is the paved road network total. So the town of Stony Plain has 189 lane kilometers of paved roads. This means that if you were to strip our roads down into separate lanes, lay each lane front to back, it would extend for 189 lane kilometers. If one were to use present-day construction rates, we can estimate that this quantity of roadway has a replacement value of roughly $270 million. Please keep in mind that this value is different than our TCA values and is only a preliminary estimate. Let's now look at our PQI values. So MPE calculated our total network PQI to be 55. With this data, now we have a quantitative value of where we are at. The town can now decide on how much we want to improve our service levels, and we can compare this to our condition with the regional levels. Based on a study done in 2017 containing 10 participating Alberta agencies, the average PQI recorded was 65. Our network sitting at 55, again, shows that we are quite behind our neighboring municipalities and that we may want to consider implementing new treatments and planning to raise levels of service. So on the left here, we have an image of a standard roadway deterioration curve. Now you can see that the initial stages of the road's life cycle, the deterioration rate is slower. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense as there aren't many cracks or deficiencies for water to infiltrate into. The main driving force of pavement deterioration is from water getting into cracks, causing damage over freeze-thaw cycles. And for some reference, in our region, we have an average of about 120 freeze-thaw cycles per year. The 3 different treatment types that are shown that the town is looking to introduce are displayed here on this deterioration curve, showing at which stages in a road's life cycle they are applicable. Preservation treatments are designed to maintain surface quality of a road early on in its life cycle. Preservation treatments are usually the cheapest type of treatment and are often the quickest to apply, decreasing the impact to road users. The next type of treatment is a restoration treatment. So these types of treatments are used mid-life cycle and are more expensive than a preservation treatment. They also take a little longer to carry out the construction phase, but in turn extend the life cycle longer than what you would see with a preservation treatment. The last type of treatment is a rehabilitation. So these treatments are the most expensive and are used only when the roadway is at the end of its life cycle. This category has the greatest impact to road users, because it has a significant amount of time to carry out this type of work. However, generally it leaves you with a brand new roadway and a renewed life cycle. For each of these three treatment classes, there is a very specific window of opportunity in the roadway's life cycle where an application of the treatment will result in the most cost-effective means of the extension of life cycle. So if the window of opportunity is missed, we will then have to wait until the next stage in the road's life cycle where the next treatment type category can be used. The name of the game is to try and keep as much of the inventory in this green/yellow window here by making strategic decisions with provided funding. Here's another image just providing a bit more detail on the scope of each type of treatment. So preservation treatments come in the form of a surface application. Restoration treatments involve removal and replacement of some or more of the asphalt. And then rehabilitation impacts down to the granular layer and sometimes into the subbase. So now that you have some knowledge on the various different types of treatment levels, how do these look in a roadway's life cycle? On this slide, we have two different scenarios. Scenario 1 shows the worst first practice of rebuilding a roadway at the end of each life cycle without applying any restoration or preservation treatments. In regards to cost effectiveness, this is the equivalent of, say, if one were to purchase a brand new car and then never treat this car with an oil change, a new timing belt and so on, and then when the car inevitably stops functioning after 2 to 3 years, you go right back to the dealership and purchase another vehicle. This simply isn't getting value for your money with this kind of process. So scenario 2 shows the use of a proper pavement management practice by applying all types of treatments to extend the life cycle and maintain the condition of the road at a higher PQI. By maintaining this condition of the roadway at a higher level, it opens up the options to conduct multiple extensions of life cycle through preservation and restoration treatments before needing to perform a more costly treatment. From a life cycle costing perspective, this scenario is much more efficient. If we then relate this knowledge back to the town's present condition status, we can estimate that there is already a significant portion of roadways in the rehabilitation stage, and an even larger amount of roadways that can use restoration work. In order to address this backlogs of roads in the rehabilitation portion, and to prevent the deterioration of roadways in the restoration stage from getting to rehabilitation, we want to consider larger annual investments into our infrastructure. If the town were to increase its roadway serviceability levels, in other words PQI, it would likely require large funding in the initial years to address this rehabilitation backlog. And then as we approach decided upon service levels, we can expect required funding to level off to a much more sustainable rate. At this point in the presentation, I'll turn over the last slide to the Manager of Engineering to discuss the town's next steps moving forward.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a second, Your Worship and Council, just to explain the next steps. So as presented earlier, the town is currently waiting for from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on the results of the FCM grant, where pavement management software has been one of the items that we requested funding for. In addition to that, in the 2021 corporate plan, administration is hoping to proceed with some ground penetrating radar study that will help strengthen the understanding of the road network throughout the town. This type of testing allows us to understand what exactly is below the asphalt in all parts of the town, well, in total structure, and it allows us for better planning of future treatments in the road network. Going forward beyond that, the major strategy implications is to address the network backlog in the most efficient manner, which maximizes lane kilometers treated and maximizing budget dollars that are allocated by council in order to treat the network. Over the next few years, the town will be moving to a more holistic pavement strategy as presented by the project engineer tonight. The part of this goal, in addition to just purely pavement management as well as the asset management, is to try and align the rehabilitation and restoration of other assets, and that includes, where possible, perhaps aligning, for example, utility infrastructure work at the same time as restoration or rehabilitation work. Again, to maximize the use of the dollars and minimize additional costs, ancillary costs to the town. Timing for this, it's a different world than it was a year ago in terms of funding. We know that, so there are the different vehicles that brought us funding from taxes, MSI, FGT, and stimulus funding. Those all need to be looked at, and so we want to make sure that we're presenting plans to council that make the most sense and make the best use of those dollars. Upon the results of the FCM grant and using perhaps being able to achieve our pay management software purchase, we hope to create a more defined 5 or 7 year plan for council's review, so that we can make them aware of what our plans are with the road backlog. And lastly is creating infrastructure renewal plans that maximize asset life and minimize costs. This includes implementation of preservation techniques along the pavement network. I believe this concludes our presentation, project engineer. We'll now welcome any questions.
Right. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. I think this is a great way for us to understand what our road condition assessment is so that we can have good data about why and which roads we're repairing and fixing and replacing. And I think I love the comment there about maximizing the use of our tax dollars. And if we have the road assessment along with the other assessment management tools about utility pipes and stuff, we can try to pair them up so that we can replace utilities and the road at the same time instead of, you know, it makes no sense to replace a road and then 2 years later dig it up because we need to replace the utility line. That makes no sense. So I'm really glad that you guys pointed that out there. I just want to make sure that I heard something right. You said in the presentation that there was 123 freeze-thaw cycles in a calendar year?
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. 170 freeze.
170?
Yes, I believe so. 120, sorry. 120, yeah.
120, yes, so 33% of the days are a freeze-thaw cycle, where it wrecks and beats up our roads.
Yes, that is correct.
I actually never knew that, but thank you very much. That's some knowledge that I didn't know before. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding on that presentation? Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at figure 3. It would be 98 out of 142. It is displays the town's present PQI status by individual road segments. So it's a very, yeah, that's the one. Is there any way that we could get this to overlay on an actual map of the town so that we could kind of see what roads are what? I just think that would be interesting to, it's rather hard to read this, but if I knew which roads this was indicating, I would have a better understanding of you know, quality of roads throughout the town. Is that possible?
Okay. Through Your Worship to Councillor Bennett, yes, administration would be happy to do up a map with an overlay and provide that to you through the Manager of Engineering.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Go ahead, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, administration, for the presentation. Through you, Your Worship, we talk a lot about our back lane being a gravel standard and not necessarily a asphalt or pavement standard. And as I look on page 116 at our back lane network of 8.5 that's actually paved and its low PQI of 43, and then going down and looking at the map that we have again on page 120 of our presentation showing 26.9% of our roads in rehabilitation, I can't help but believe, just from looking at the map, which, as Councillor Bennett just mentioned, if we had one that was overlaid with the streets, I believe a majority of what I'm seeing in the rehabilitation is actually back lane. So I'm curious, as we move forward, are we actually looking at rehabilitation plans for back lanes that were paved, or are we going to be looking at maintaining our gravel standard and converting those from a paved surface to a gravel surface when they no longer meet the standards to be a paved surface? It just, it wasn't really mentioned at all in the report, and I know we have the standard, but many of our subdivisions are coming with paved alleyways and back lanes, and so when that pavement condition deteriorates, what are we now doing? Because our policy states gravel standard, and I'm just not certain through this presentation.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Laurie. So the lanes is something that's of great interest to administration. It is one of our, I would call it one of our operators' irritants because they are difficult to maintain. The asphalt does break up and it's difficult to maintain, and the gravel is difficult to maintain in various seasons, of course, when they're soft and hard to look after. So a lane program is something we're interested in developing. We have put it in the corporate plan for consideration in the future based on funding restrictions, et cetera. Council will see that in the corporate plan coming up. So it definitely is on our radar on how we might handle the back lanes. And of course, the data you see in front of you here does give us more information with which to make some strategic decisions on whether how to maintain them, how to look after them, whether they're converted to gravel, or how they are looked after in our asset management. The one proviso, I guess we'll throw in. I know that the engineering manager has experience in this, and so do I. That the lanes are very expensive in relation to upgrades, and the gas lines, et cetera, in them are typically quite low, and they're very expensive to upgrade to paved standards. So going forward, we'll take that information into account when we plan the future for that important infrastructure.
Good. And before I go to Councillor Mattis, just want to add on to that. You know, with a gravel standard, that's just adding more gravel and then just blading it so it flows nicely. You know, in other back lane programs, municipalities are starting to use a use asphalt concrete mix to throw that on there as a standard. So that packs down and it's hard. It's almost like a semi-hard surface, but it's cheaper than having it fully paved, but it's also better than having it gravel. Is that something that we'll consider in this road asset management and conditioning?
Your Worship, I'll start this, and maybe the engineering manager will supplement my answer. One of the considerations here is the back lanes do get heavy loads with the waste management trucks, which are on them frequently. So whatever structure we put on there, if we have to make sure we can maintain it and that it will withstand the loads. And the trucks used by GFL are very heavy, and they do cause a lot of damage. Perhaps the engineering manager has more comments to make on the quality of, I would call them, various alternative pavement structures in relation to cement stabilized surfaces or other surfaces.
Thank you, General Manager. I believe the material you're referencing are referred to as asphalt millings, Your Worship. The use of millings is it's quite convenient if you have a supply of them or availability to them. There's lots of applications in which they can work. As the General Manager, though, alluded to, with the utilities being shallow and the large trucks that can occasionally go through them, you want to ensure there's a pavement structure that's strong enough to not deform under those loads. Asphalt millings, while convenient, and they do bind and create a semi-hard surface, as you alluded to, they are more prone to deformation, and as such, they can cause some distortion to lower profile vehicles such as cars, and they're more difficult for maintenance crews to chew out. That said, there are ways to use millings effectively if the appropriate gravel subbase and other considerations are done. This is a question. There's lots of ways to build an asphalt or a roadway structure to meet the needs, depending on what we want to achieve. If gravel structure is the path to be maintained going forward, there are ways to build substantial gravel structures. There are advantages and disadvantages to those. It's a discussion of, this goes back to the global, with asset management, the levels of service we wish to see in these back alleys. As we see back alleys come on with, if they're paved surfaces, the question becomes how do we maintain that paved surface for as long as we can in the state it's in? And then the ones that are approaching rehabilitation, do we let those go to a gravel state or a milling state, as you alluded to? These are discussions that need to be had. This is simply the opening salvo, so to speak, in terms of this discussion to have these questions come out.
Thank you. Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is part of the question that I have as well, but you've talked about your strategies to maximize the lane kilometer improvements with available budgets. And through the Alberta Recycling Management Authority, I've been I'm told about using recycled tires, crushed tires for roads, and have had, that's been quite successful, I understand. And then also, I had sent our CAO some information from a BC road construction firm, and they were using some recycled tire component to the roads as well. So, I mean, I think there's other options out there. I'm just wondering, has there been a comparison made and analysis? And then the third comment is, I've also had a number of residents, or a couple of residents ask me about, could they have their garbage in the front as opposed to in the back alleys? So all of those things are questions to me as to, you know, is there a more effective way to, you know, have our back alleys, and do they have to be used for garbage and, you know, that type of thing, and big heavy trucks on them?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Mattis, the use of crushed tires in roads is something that's been studied, and I'll ask the engineering manager if he's aware of any of the results of the studies. In my previous roles, I am aware of some rural areas who have tried those in certain circumstances, but I'm not aware of any of our regional neighbors who've gone that way. So it's a question we can ask. In relation to garbage in the front versus in the alley, it is something which we've thought about. There are implications for residents there because they will lose parking, et cetera. So I know that a lot of some people cherish their alley use. Others are more receptive to the change. So I think the approach we are considering in the future would be to go about it in a thoughtful way, survey our residents, get their opinions on these things, determine you know, public support for front versus back, and try to not make it a divisive issue. So that's our current approach, would be to think of these in the future in a rigorous and thoughtful manner with consultation with our residents.
And just to follow up with that, Your Worship, just, you know, in terms of when we're surveying our residents, if they understood some of the facts and information about different roads, quality, you know, in terms of back alleys, and been able to make a more informed decision as to what would be in their best interest, would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to add on to that comments and conversation by Councillor Mattis is, you know, every spring we see the signs up. Everybody west of 48th Street in the old part of town has to now move to front alley pickup because the roads, the back alleys are soft because usually a lot of them are gravel standard. So we do that for a couple months anyways. So is it a direction of council to change that service level so that we all do garbage and organic pickup on the front streets, the streets that are designed to hold the extra weight of the vehicles that are picking up the garbage and the recycling?
Your worship, if I hear the question correctly, is it a decision of council? Is that your question? I'm not sure whether that's a governance decision that council should make, or whether administration should follow our citizens on that. I guess I'd have to consider that. I do think what I propose is that if it's the will of council that this subject be brought forward for consideration, that administration put together a plan of what we would do, how we would survey residents or not, and get feedback, and then what it might look like, what the implications might be, more rigorous analysis of that, and we'd be happy to bring that forward to council with a recommendation on how we might move forward based on what we find through the analysis.
Okay, so thank you. So from what I just heard from you, it's an administrative function for you guys to review and implement and update council, and council's decision is our level of service for waste service levels, and you guys take care of that rest. Because front or back, it's you guys' call. Okay, question. Any more questions? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. I was just wondering if I could get some help understanding the study average PQI and the Transport Canada PQI average, which I believe was 65, and ours coming in at 55. So I'd just like to know what communities that would have been based on. And just going to page 116 when it says study average PQI and it says equals 65, that's that Transport Canada number again, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer. So the study, the 2017 study was done with 10 participating Alberta agencies, so it wasn't a Transport Canada study. This was a study actually from a paper published by our own manager of engineering. The agencies included in that include the City of Grand Prairie, City of Red Deer, City of Calgary, and to list the rest, I would have to review the paper and get back to you.
Sorry, and just for clarity, those were Alberta communities?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Your worship, just to supplement, some of our regional partners have numbers which are higher than our number. 55 would be considered I don't know, on the low end, I guess, compared to some of our regional neighbors. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I guess it's just the facts that's our number. What we do with that is up to us and how we plan our program to improve it. And I suspect if we don't go forward with some of the things that are going to be recommended, our number will go down. It won't go up. So, and I suspect the residents will not be happy with that kind of consequence. So our goal now is to understand the 55, what it means, and how we can move it up based on the situation we're under. And I believe that residents will be happy with what they see because we'll be very efficient with the money, and it'll be a very targeted and effective program.
Any other questions? Oh, I have a question on page 119. When we refer to the different scenarios of where it showed you, where you started your preservation and then where you did restoration versus if you just built the road, left it sat there and do nothing, and then having to rebuild the road again. So in terms of extending the life and cycle, because it's kind of, the map actually, well, this diagram here kind of doesn't show you very well, because by the time you preserve and restore, your life cycle is this, so is it the amount of money that we spend doing the preservation and restoration extends it twice as long as if we didn't do nothing and then rebuilt it. Is that correct?
Your worship, I'll field that one. Implementing a preservation strategy will yield you more time than if you had not. Now, it depends. There's a number of factors that affect how well the preservation activities will work, including what we select, if it's microsurfacing, crack sealing, restorative seals, and so forth. But by and large, if you do early interventions within the roadway, you are extending that quality for longer. And you are buying time. Now, it can depend also on the amount of traffic, the type of roadway, whether the roadway is under-designed for its current traffic capacity. There are a number of things, if I got into the details, we could discuss at length, but by and large, preservation done at the appropriate times gains you, I believe from a previous study, approximately an extra 5 to 7 years off the life cycle. And I'm really reaching into the banks of my research that I've done. And then if you implement the restoration at the right time, you're effectively keeping your line of that quality at the highest level for the most minimal amount of dollars. And if you were to associate dollars spent on the rehabilitation of the asset versus how much you spend at more iterative interventions, by and large, the municipal agency always saves money in that strategy.
Thank you. And just another question of just for understanding for me. I think in the presentation, it was mentioned that the wheel path ruts become more noticeable. I've noticed that too, driving on 16 and 16A and just driving out through the communities. So we know that over time, it creates the path where and it ruts down where the wheel travels. So could you not build a road that actually has a crown there, so over time you compress it so then it's flat in 20 years instead of depressed in 20 years?
Your worship, thank you for the question. rutting is an extensively studied problem, and there is, to date, after several decades on the research, there is no bulletproof answer to preventing ruts. Edmonton has implemented, the Edmonton mix designs that we are currently implementing here at the town allow the town to select asphalt mixes that are more durable and resilient to rutting, should we have noticed that prior to rehabilitation. So for noticing deep ruts, there are more options for the town to select to prevent rutting from coming back. It doesn't make it rut-proof with anything. With the one example that I can give council from my research is from the city of Edmonton, the Yellowhead Trail near the Costco was experiencing ruts upwards of 60 millimeters, which is very excessive. Once they implemented a new style of asphalt mix, they reduced that rutting down to 20. Now that still is rutting, but it is substantially more safe to drive on a rut that's 20 millimeters, an inch, rather than 3 inches. So it really, even with that much research and time and investment, they achieved a 66% decrease in the level of rut over the same period of time. So there are tools available to us for us to implement if there is a severe rutting problem or other problem, but it's about, as the project engineer alluded to, picking the right treatment at the right time for the right road.
Thank you. That's good information to know. Any other questions of clarity? Okay, so none. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative, and I do look forward, and hopefully that we do receive the SCM grant so that we can continue on this process. As mentioned in the presentation, this is going to be a 5 to 7 year build out, so that we have the proper budgeting and corporate plan and kind of plan and ready so that we can maintain, restore, and rehabilitate our roads. So thank you. Deputy Mayor, if we can have a motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Town Council accept the road condition assessment presentation for information.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So members of council, we had the presentation. We had some questions of clear and understanding. Any other questions or comments? Oh, see none?
Well,
Go ahead.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor. I think it's certainly time that we got into the process of looking at this and trying to figure out a solution. Our residents deserve that kind of initiative from us to look ahead and see what we can do to maintain their roads.
Excellent point. And that's also a sign of our municipality evolving and growing. So, actually, I think we were all there for the presentation when the contractors are in there, and one of the supervisors said that how council or how Town Stony Plain determined the road grade worth or not was to overload a 3-ton truck and drive on the roads, and somebody fall out behind that, and if it dips a lot, well, then that road needs to be done sooner than a road that didn't dip as much. So going from that process that we did many years ago to now where we have a kind of a data analysis of how everything works to allow us to plan better. So thank you. Councilor Fletchko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Reading through this report is a very good report. However, this only speaks to current roads in our community. I'm wondering, are you also considering new development within our community of new ways to help to mitigate this so that it does allow the roads to last longer within our communities? So specifically to the developers, and are we looking at ways to try and keep them costs down so it still encourages them to come to our town?
Your Worship, I'll lead this off, and I'll ask the engineering manager to supplement. The key thing here would be our standards, the standards with which we accept the roads in the first place, making them high enough so that there's very little interventions that need to be done in the first 25 years. Our standards are robust, and we updated them this year. And I know the engineering manager included a new pavement design in there. So to answer your question, I believe we're doing everything we can to ensure that the roads we take on through our growth and through our development community are the highest quality, and will have very little maintenance costs initially with I would call them more typical interventions through time, as illustrated in the curves we saw here today. Thank you.
Your Worship, through the Council of Pledgeco, just to expand on the General Manager's comments, yeah, there are, the town administration works hard with the development community to ensure that there's a balance of what the town needs for that road or that infrastructure as a whole as they're built out in new developments, so that when the town takes on the maintenance and the responsibilities of it, it's something that, one, the town can maintain, and two, that there is we're working towards a process that once they come into our inventory, we understand, going back to the asset management discussion, we understand where they are and how much of that asset has come online through FA once we have the final acceptance completed, and to properly ensure that we are timing the treatments effectively through a condition-driven assessment. There are lots of ways there's lots of factors to consider, but by and large, we like to make sure that once we know it's online, once we know it's the town's, that we're tracking it and that we're ensuring that we're making the investments where they're needed at the right time.
Thank you. Great questions. I have one more just to ask, and maybe for administration to provide some comment. Around this council chamber and through our community, we talk about developments, and Councillor Fletchko just raised that right now. We talk about arterial networks and collector roads and local roads, right? We speak about it because we kind of understand a little bit of it, but our residents do not understand what the difference between a collector road is, a local road is, and an arterial road is. For them, a road is a road. So can administration provide some background of the differences of the three classifications of roads, so that we can, as council, go out and share that information, and then those that are watching on YouTube, and further on, because this is database there that we can say this is the difference between the three types of roads and why we allow certain developments on certain roads and not developments on other ones.
Your Worship, I'll take that question. If the General Manager has any additional comments, I'll maybe pass it back to him. So one update that I'll give council is that we're taking a holistic look at our roadway classifications in the Transportation Master Plan to ensure that they represent current use and amount of vehicles that are being used on those roads right now. The current transportation study is approaching 10 years old, so it's time to take a look at that and make sure that the roads that are classified in their classifications are appropriate. But as a general answer to the question, what is an arterial collector and local? Arterials are typically major conveyances of major traffic, such as truck traffic, large volumes of vehicles, either across or through the town itself, to facilitate getting from one end to the other. The collectors allow access to either business districts or local communities, things that connect people to their homes or businesses. And then locals, of course, are lower volume roads that either connect people to their homes or directly into their places of work. Those typically are lower volume roads in your residential areas, but you can also have some local classifications in some industrial areas as well. I hope that's broad enough for your Worship.
Your Worship, to supplement, the one area you will see the classifications mentioned most in the public will be the snow policy, that which council saw at the last meeting and will come back to council in November. We're trying to use the same nomenclature in terms in the policy and when we speak to the public about our services that we're providing throughout the winter. So you're going to see us start to be clear in how we describe our services in relation to these roads and their classifications. One of the things that you may notice in the past, we use terms that are ambiguous or not clear, the main roads, the school routes, the whatever. It's common in municipalities to start using slangs for words or whatever. So we're trying to provide clarity in the classifications and how they're used, so that our residents get comfortable with how we classify them and how we work with them to provide the services.
Thank you. No more hands up, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And that is passed. Moving on to 9.5, which is the capital funding strategy. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you and all of council, we're here tonight to talk further about fiscal sustainability, specifically the capital funding. The town continues to advance its knowledge of its capital assets, future requirements to maintain and replace these assets through condition assessments, such as the roads, as you just saw, as well as life cycle planning. There are also many capital initiatives to better serve the community, which also needs to be evaluative of how best to finance. The strategy tonight outlines the town's history, along with many other municipalities, of being reliant on grants to fund many of the capital requirements, mainly through the provincial MSI grants over the past 10 years. With the current federal and provincial fiscal challenges, the future capital funding through grants has become more uncertain. As part of moving the town to a more sustainable financial position, one-time funding such as grants are best used to fund one-time projects, and ongoing capital such as annual road rehab should be funded by a more sustainable funding source, such as reserves, which are typically funded through the tax base. Capital can be funded by grants, reserves, third-party contributions, which in the town's case has often come from our regional partners, debenture financing, or the off-site levy funding, which are collected for future core infrastructure growth projects. Those are all defined within the strategy, and they're in the strategy so that both council, administration, and the public understand how we do fund capital and the options there. The future strategies noted within the capital strategy tie into the update you received tonight, and that we need to continue further advancing asset management capacity within the organization, which is key to understanding the asset conditions and requirements so funding can be planned and matched to those requirements. This will allow the public and council to understand the future needs, so council as the decision makers can allocate the resources efficiently and sustainably where possible. Obviously, this is going to take time, and it's multi-years and a continued discussion. The other future strategies that we had noted within the strategy was the off-site levy bylaw, which is slated to be updated in 2021. This ensures that growth monies is funding growth projects. An example of, there was questions about the off-site levies earlier tonight, and an example of how we have used those in the past to fund would be for the Veterans Boulevard when it went from a 2-lane standard to a 4-lane standard. They're for specific projects and restricted through how we collect those offsites, but it's important that we're updating those bylaws regularly so that they fund those projects appropriately, that development pays for that new standard. The other future strategy is just further refining and taking advantage of grant opportunities as they become available. Those seem to be moving to more specific projects, and so we're just reviewing our processes internally to make sure that we're tight in understanding what grants are coming available and that we're applying for those for the projects that we know are coming, so that we can utilize those grant funds and we don't have to tax the residents. So the principles and the questions that we've reviewed throughout the fiscal sustainability are included on page 130 and 131 of the council package tonight, and include sustainability, flexibility, minimizing vulnerability, and achieving the priorities of the town. It's a challenging problem in that 100 years of infrastructure has come into the town without a plan to really how to maintain that, how to replace it into the future. As you can see, we've made progress and we'll continue that progress as we continue on with asset management. And we trust that these principles and questions around capital funding are timely as we head into corporate planning in the next month. So wrapping up, I'm happy to report this was the conclusion of the phase 1 of the fiscal sustainability. There's still a lot of work to do, and we are busy planning the next strategies to come to council in the next year. And we'll bring that plan back to council to understand what's coming at you for the next year as we continue this discussion. And that concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Good. Thank you very much for the presentation, and it's good to hear that we are reviewing all of the policies and bringing them to a holistic approach for town council to review and to consider as we deal with capital funding, asset management, roads, and all the things that we've talked about as a council. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding from the presentation from the general manager? Okay. Councilor Mattis, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, just excellent overall framework that I've been seeing over these last number of months, and I really appreciate it. At the end of all of this, I'm assuming we're going to have better municipal guidance and controls, better ability to make decisions or provide direction from council, a longer-term focus versus a short-term trying to take or capitalize on an opportunity that presents itself, more thinking long-term is what those opportunities will be and planning for them, and of course being adaptable. The challenge that I always have is that there is only one taxpayer, and whether you call it a tax levy or you call it a utility charge or you call it a property tax, there's only one taxpayer. And so how do we bring all of that together to understand what is the, I guess, the resilience, the ability of the taxpayer, and how do we address that need in terms of just affordability and provide for the things that we're talking about through these programs?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, I mean, it's a great comment, and especially in these challenging times that where we know residents are struggling with any increases. As you all know, I mean, as a municipality, we have limited options. So, you know, increasing revenue has been a strategy over the past. That is, the taxpayer just does not want to see increases, and that's sort of the economic environment we're in. So really the only other strategy we have is to reduce service levels or reduce expenditures to live within that revenue that we're able to collect. So it's quite limited in the sort of the levers, financial levers that you can pull around that. And they're challenging discussions and challenging choices for sure. So I think, you know, that is the goal of having some of these discussions with council is making sure that we as administration and council and the public are educated and on the same page so that we can make the best decisions going forward. And so that's what we'll continue to move on, but definitely a challenging balance there.
If I could just follow-up comment, you know, we're all working together, and it's whether we are healthcare or education or whether we're a municipality or we're the provincial government or the federal government, we all need to work together to solve the issues that we're dealing with right now. And I've heard, you know, so often, well, that level of government or you know, if we're talking about education and just not understanding maybe the situation that we see with our business owners in our community and how they have been hit such a significant blow, whether it's oil and gas related and then COVID related. And the very fact that businesses are the engines behind our society in terms of economically and the strength of our economics, and to understand that as a overall society, we all have to work together to come to some good solutions. And that starts here with us and trying to work with our partners to find good solutions moving forward. And this is, I think, a really good tool to help us do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. I agree with Councillor Matties. It's a great report, and I'm just curious. I was particularly struck by the principles section where it asks a whole bunch of great questions. I'm just curious as to when and how council will get to see some of the answers to these questions.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer. So I think the questions become a tool for all of us, and I think it'll be, you know, most of them come out a big time during corporate planning as we go through sort of what the plan is over the next 3 years. So I don't think there's necessarily direct answers to each of these, but I think of them as considerations. So as we look at the plan and as you look at the plan, you know, pulling out the framework and sort of reflecting on, are we considering all aspects and then finding that balance as to what things to fund and what things to move out into the future and having those conversations. So they're really more of a tool than administration coming and saying, here's all the exact answers, because there's a number of different priorities and a number of different perspectives as to what's important. I think the main one that struck me tonight, as it was sort of random that it aligned with some of the asset management work, is as you understand that piece more, it becomes easier to understand, there's a funding gap there, and that's typical of of all municipalities really, that there's X number of dollars you would like to have, that's limited, and so how do you allocate those over time, and decide, do you put money there, or do you put money over to project X? But it's really about good data, and so that you as the decision makers feel educated to make those good decisions.
There's no hands up, but maybe just one question of clear understanding for me. On page 129, under grant funding, under the current strategies we have, definitely the town relies on a lot of grant funding, which is akin to many, many other municipalities in Alberta. Because the last paragraph is, in order to be sustainable, the town should have the ability to maintain and replace infrastructure without the use of third-party funding. So going through what we've just seen through the financial trends report, asset management stuff, the only way that we can do that is if we increase taxes by like 1,000% to pay for everything. So I'm just wondering, that paragraph there, are you suggesting that we should increase our taxes to do this? Because we know that for every tax dollar that's collected, for every Albertan, 8 cents comes to the municipality. The other 92 cents are split between the province and the federal government. So how are we supposed to be, as a town, with 8 cents on every dollar to fund our own infrastructure projects?
Your Worship, it's a great question, and I think you make a good point. I mean, there's no way that the municipality could plan to replace all of our infrastructure through the tax base. But it's having those conversations about what are the important assets, the roads, of what service levels do you want to keep those at, and are we putting enough money aside so that you can maintain that and replace it to a certain level. But it's probably more of an ideal that those would be through sustainable sources, because of the reliance there on the provincial and federal governments, which is out of your control. So it definitely becomes more challenging, and I think that is the challenging situation currently of, we know the MSI agreements are up for expiry with the province, and so what does that mean for our funding program going forward, as that's how we funded a lot of our capital in the past.
Thank you. And maybe another question, with the changes to the new MGA, which allows municipalities to form crown corporations, which are for-profit corporations that we can now do, would something like a strategy of having third-party contributors to create infrastructure within our community, so that we don't have to raise taxes or debenture borrow, but then have a third party come in as a joint partner to build something, and then recoup those dollars back slowly?
Your Worship, I think you're referring to like a P3. Yeah. So I mean, that is a strategy some municipalities have explored, and it's maybe something for the right project that would be a funding strategy for the town as well. So I think those creative ideas are things we should be researching and looking into, because it's a challenging time right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Presentation. Okay, see none. Councillor Plechko for the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council accept the Fiscal Sustainability Framework Capital Funding Strategy Report for information.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation, and great work on that. Members of Council, any other questions and comments? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 9.6 is the natural gas franchise fee increase. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this item is before you tonight just as information that it will be coming in the corporate plan, but we wanted to bring it if council had any questions around it, or needed information on it. And I'd ask the Manager of Financial Services to just walk you through the report tonight.
Thank you. As we move through the corporate planning process for 2021 to 2023 and fiscal restraints remain tight, it is important to explore and review other potential sources of revenue to ease the burden of taxes on residents. The town of Stony Plain is currently at the cap for the electricity franchise fee agreements, however, not on the natural gas side. The natural gas franchise fee is the town's exclusive right granted to the gas companies to construct, operate, and maintain the gas distribution system, has the ability to move from 30% to 35%, which would bring additional revenue in the amount of $217,378 annually. This fee is shared amongst all facilities utilizing natural gas within the town of Stony Plain. That includes those that may be exempt from taxation, which equalizes the taxation burden. The average resident utilizing 115 gigajoules of gas per year is estimated to see an impact monthly of $2.19 or $26.33 annually. Due to timelines of the corporate plan approval, it is anticipated the fee, if approved through the corporate planning process, would be implemented for approximately 11 months of 2021, just due to the timelines that are required for notice. This would be an impact of additional revenue in the amount of $200,000 that will be added to the 2021 to 2023 corporate plan for council's review.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding? Councilor Pleshko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through to administration, page 135 of 142. The impact to increase to a customer using 150 gigajoules of gas per year is estimated to be $26.33 annually. Is 115 gigajoules the average that the average house uses a year?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Councillor Pleshko. Yes, I believe so.
Can we make sure that that's correct? That seems a very low number comparative to what I understand would be the average household in use of gigajoules.
Good question, Councilor Pleshko. It's maybe because the background information is here. Why did we choose 115?
Good question.
Through you, Your Worship, I do not have the answer to that. I had one of my staff prepare that portion, so I'll have to get back to you with that number. But my assumption is, I didn't ask that question specifically, but that's a great question. Was that this was comparable to what was presented in the past when this was increased just a few years ago, up to the 30%.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, I just have a question. We talk about, I think what you said was other sources of revenue to ease the burden on residents, but the reality is this is still placing it directly on the residents' shoulders. I'm curious, when we collect these franchise fees, is there a specific purpose, specific fund, or a specific reserve that these fees are going into to fund specific projects, or is this considered more as general revenue?
Thank you. Through Your Worship to Councillor Laurie, this goes into general revenue and offsets the tax burden that is requisitioned through the tax rate.
Okay. And a follow-up, if I may, Your Worship?
Go ahead.
Thank you. There was a chart included on page 138 that shows the comparative municipalities, I believe that would be within ATCO's services. And there are very few on this list that are even at 30, which is our current state, and 35, which is what is being proposed. I'm just wondering if we can get a little bit more of an elaboration on why we are being proposed to go to 35%, other than just achieving another $217,000 in revenue, or saving us from approximately a 1.25% tax increase in the corporate plan.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie. So in the past, we have done increases as well, and I think the main rationalization of this is that it's the spreading of it across the, I want to say tax base, but that's not, across the residents. So those that don't pay taxes would pay franchise fees. So it's seen as more equitable. And so we also know that our regional neighbor was looking at a similar increase, although I'm not sure that they're proceeding with that. So it was alignment there as well. Those would be the two reasons.
And just one more follow-up on that then. Can you provide us with a percentage of residents, be it residential or commercial, that do not pay property taxes?
Your worship, through to Councillor Laurie, I don't have that at this point, but that's something that we could bring as part of the corporate plan when you debate it, if that is helpful to you.
If we could, a little bit more information, including some confirmed numbers for the average household usage, et cetera, as Councillor Palechko already mentioned. I think that'd be very vital for the corporate plan when we discuss this. Thank you.
Through your worship, I could add as well. So I just did have confirmation from my staff member that ADCO Gas was the one who provided that gigajoule number to us, and that was similar to what Spruce had used when they had done their presentation as well just a few weeks ago. And as for just on the percentage residential, we don't have those numbers, but that would include things like hospitals and things that we would receive grants in lieu or would be exempt from taxes.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Matthews?
Thank you, Your Worship. To administration, in our financial trend report, we used 6 communities to compare with: Beaumont, Brooks, Cochrane, Cold Lake, Strathmore, and, sorry, five communities. And there's only one of those communities on this list. But beyond that, I did compare with Beaumont in 2019, their electrical 17.25%, their gas was 28.5%. And then I couldn't really find any of the others. Cold Lake was 13% from the rate sheet here. So for corporate planning, I would sure like to see what our comparative communities are charging for their utilities.
Okay, that's a good comment. And then at the same time, I think if we're going to compare that, we should have a clear understanding of also their tax rate as well. So that. Right. Any other questions, comments? No. Seeing none, thank you very much for providing this information for council. I think I've been as part of council when we had a couple of increases, and the main reason that these increases were approved by council is to kind of spread the tax requests from many users versus just those properties that are actually charged a tax bill. So, for example, Councillor Laurie mentioned that it was a 1.25% increase. Well, it actually is not a 1.25% increase. It's a little higher than that because you have to subtract the properties that do not pay taxes, such as hospitals, schools, churches, all those amenities that do not pay taxes are not part of the taxing. So it is an attempt to lower the taxes so we collect that it's the money that we need to operate is spread over a larger area instead of a smaller area. Okay. Councillor Lloyd, please, with the motion.
Yes, Your Worship. The Town Council accept the natural gas franchise fee report for information.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other final comments? Thank you, Mr. Administration. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. That ends our business items. So moving on to council information and council discussion. Councillor Matthews, I'll start with you. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Just one comment, I guess, with regards to the Caring Hearts program. We had a survey with regards to how we as participants in that program, how we felt and how we felt if we had contributed more to the community and to others in the community. So I completed that survey today. I am going to continue with one of the individuals that I called on a regular basis. The other two feel that they're good standing on their own again, and so it does show that we had some really good results with it, and I was very thankful to be part of that program. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question through you to administration, maybe if they could follow up on. With the reopening of the 52nd Avenue and Highway 779 intersection on the realignment, I've noticed that the light timing is still staggered. And so I'm just curious as to if there is a plan from Alberta Transportation, or if we can follow up with Alberta Transportation now that that intersection is properly aligned, if the light timing can be adjusted so that it can facilitate proper two-way traffic.
Your worship, through you to Councilor Laurie, I'll check with Alberta Transportation and get back to you on what the plan is for the signalization there.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'd like to just give a brief update on what's happening with the Mayor's Task Force on Community Resiliency. We've had a few meetings now. We're fortunate to have 2 members of council that sit on that task force, but there's 4 other members, 3 maybe, whether you come or not, that really don't have a clue what we're doing. So I thought I'd just give a brief update. So the Mayor's Task Force has been working. We're scheduled to give a report to council on December 10th. So at this point, the task force feels that their mission is to gather as much information from community groups and organizations and individuals as they can to kind of get a foundation as to what happened. Well, we asked them 5 questions. What's your story? What were you like before COVID? What was the first reaction when COVID and the regulations hit? How did you cope? What does your future look like? And what are the recommendations to council? So last meeting, we had 2 very, very good presentations. One was FCSS, and they had most of the departments there that night to give a brief update on exactly what FCSS programs changed and how they enacted several of the initiatives to help support our residents during COVID. Then we also had a retailer from Main Street, actually Dara Choi from Dara's, come and give a presentation, and she talked a lot about changes that she's seen over the last several years, and actually the impact that not only did COVID have on our business, but also downtown redevelopment. So that was a really good picture as to what kind of things happened with our downtown retailers. Over the next few weeks, we have several more organizations and people coming to us to give us their picture, their story, their overview. On October 20th, our own economic development officer, Sean McCauley, is he an officer or is he a general manager? General manager is coming to give us an overview of not only economic development in Stony Plain, but he also has input into the tri-municipal economic development and Edmonton Global. And then we have Paul Beefus. Also that night, Paul is the manager of our local Alberta Treasury branch. So we have different speakers from last meeting until the middle of November, where we'll start composing the report for council as to what we've heard and just kind of the trends going forward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I wanted to say, but perhaps other councillors have questions for me or the other task members.
Thank you, Marcia. Deputy Mayor, any questions or comments regarding Deputy Mayor's report? Okay, see none. Thank you very much for taking the lead on that, and thank you to also Council Matties and Council Pacheco for sitting on that task force. And again, as the Deputy Mayor has mentioned, we were hit with many things happening in 2020 that we're not expecting. A lot of things happened in the community that we're not proud of. There's a lot of people that fell through the cap the gaps. So as part of the Community Resiliency Task Force is to figure out, as things start to get to normal, as whatever normal is, and the economy starts to turn around in the next couple of years, do we as a community just cover everything up with a rug because we don't want to deal with them? Or do we deal with them as a community to make ourselves more resilient so that we can handle the next disaster, we can handle the next pandemic as a community together? So thank you very much for that work. Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just thought I'd, three things. First, Tuesday, I had the opportunity to attend a Building Futures event, which is a partnership with Parkland School Division and the Connections for Learning and Coventry Homes. Very interesting program. They have, I believe it's grade 10s. They will be attending all of their classes in a home that they are building. So it gives them an opportunity and exposure from everything from the mortgage of a home to obviously building a home, the trades, and then they'll even have an opportunity to help sell it and see how that angle all works out. So very interesting. And the Parkland School Division had briefly mentioned that they wouldn't mind coming to us and kind of giving us the lowdown on that story or on that program. And then second are our light issues. One, for Public Works, there's a street light on 55th Avenue and 48th Street that blinks nonstop all evening. So I'm not sure if somebody can take a look at.
Your Worship, my report is that that light has been fixed a second time. So if that is not correct, if anybody could please let us know, and we'll ask Fortis to go out there a third time to fix it.
Okay, well, it was earlier in the week, so maybe when I drive home this evening.
It was fixed on Friday, is my information that I have.
I'll check it on the way home. And then just second, also I noticed downtown, I'm not sure what we call those stubby lights, Mr. Mayor, they were on well into the morning the other day, and I'm just curious if that's a regular thing or maybe somebody might want to address that as well.
Okay, so the bollards, there's lights in them, so are they on a timer or on a photo eye?
Your Worship, I'll check into the bollard situation and get back to council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Gore, you had your finger up.
Your Worship, and I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Meyer's comment, and since we're in our public meeting, if we do have any public watching, Fortis actually has an incredible app, and if you download the Fortis app, it uses your GPS technology, and you can report a problem with a street light directly on it. So since the infrastructure doesn't belong to the town, belongs to Fortis, that's probably the quickest way we can get our residents to report those problems. I've used it in my subdivision for a light that had a very similar issue, and it was fixed quite quickly. It even shows you that a report's been made on it. It shows you whether a ticket's been created for service, etc. So if anybody's watching, or for Councillor Meyer or anybody else, downloading the Fortis app, it's a great tool to use for our community.
Thank you. That's good. You can also use Twitter, and then they respond pretty quick too. Okay. Councillor Pletchko, anything to update or add to the discussion?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just a couple of things this evening. With the increased traffic from 779 to Range Road 12, I'm just wondering if we can have that road graded on a more regular basis. It has been more than a month since we've seen a grader out there. I've had several people along that road phone and complain. It is washboard from Range Road 628 right through to Highway 16A. And the other thing is, I don't know what the process would be, but maybe you can help me with that. The train tracks that are there have about a 18-inch lift between one track to the other. And I'm just wondering if we notify CN or who we notify in regards to that so that it's a little more even to get across.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Pletchko, regarding the work between the tracks, I'll have to get back to council on that. I know we're not allowed to go into the right of way and work there without CN approval, and so we'll check on that. In relation to the regular grading, I'm unaware if we've not been grading it once a week, which is our standard. So I'll check into that and report back to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loy.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And one comment to the general manager there, planning. You alluded to there, Councillor Laurie, the lights on the west side on 52nd and 779. But I noticed now that the road comes down, coming from the west to the east, has made that 20 or 30 degree change. And I observed a vehicle that was northbound on the 5th, and all of a sudden when it went to turn left onto 52nd Avenue, one of the vehicles that was in the lane there to turn left itself onto the 5th Meridian, it was very close. I don't know whether when we do the actual painting, if that particular turn lane, if it's back 10 or 15 feet like we have in other things of town. I only saw it once. It was fleeting, but I did see that there could be a concern there, so I'm just bringing that to your attention and for somebody to go out and take a look and see if there's something that should or was not done. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And I think our general manager will forward that concern to AT. Yes. Yes, and speaking of it, at 52nd Avenue, I travel that all the time, and it is a little more congested. And I think one of the reasons why it has not yet been fully changed and synced is because that it's still one lane north-south right now. And I think they'll flip it over if they want to north-south, one lane on the west side when they mill and pave the east side. So I think it's all about timing and trying to get things proper. So if we change it too quickly without having the full intersection done, then I think it causes more issues than fixes the issues and the problems. So I think we just got to just let our residents know just to be cautious in that intersection. It is a new signalization and the way people, because going that way, going east, now there's on 52nd Avenue, there's now 3 lanes, one to turn, one to go straight, and one to go right. Yeah, which is still confusing because people haven't gotten used to that yet. So.
It just seemed to be odd to me, Your Worship.
Yes.
You got to sync here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, and the administration staff will send that email out. Thank you. Actually, I just have one thing to update is before our next council meeting is Small Business Week. The Chamber is putting on kind of a virtual event that's happening, and we all know that small businesses are the heartbeat of our communities. Many small businesses donate their time, resources, and dollars earned in the community back into the community to support community groups, user groups, sports functions, and everything that you can think of. They are here in our community. So I don't need to say this just because it's Small Business Week, but every day we should take the thought of supporting small businesses in our communities, because those are the people that are your neighbors, they're your friends, they attend sporting events with you. They're also the ones that will donate to playground refabs, donate to school auctions, they'll also donate to sports events. So if we support them, they're able to support our community better. So thank you to all small businesses out there. We definitely appreciate you, and we're here to support you if you need as well. With that, that ends our council agenda. So thank you, administration, for all the good detailed reports that were presented to us. That gave us a lot to think about and to consider as we come to corporate planning in the next month. So thank you very much. We're adjourned.